Hi, I'm Calivan, and welcome to Bar Better. This new series has a simple objective. I want to try and provide a bit of help so that brand new players can improve their game and gain the confidence they need to both join and enjoy the multiplayer battles. Bar is a lot of fun, but it's also pretty complex and it can be difficult to progress if you're unsure how it all fits together. So that's where we're going to focus our efforts. Because if we can get the basics down, then we'll be in a good place to improve through practice and understand some of the more advanced advice available on YouTube and elsewhere. In this first episode, we're going to start from the very beginning and talk about the nuts and bolts of our economy. There are three resources in Bar: metal, energy, and build power. Metal and energy are your more tangible resources that are used for construction and maintenance, and build power is a slightly more nebulous figure that represents how quickly you are able to channel those other two resources into projects. Essentially, metal and energy is your money, and build power is how fast you can spend it. But it's not just new construction. Quite a few units in Bar require energy and sometimes metal to perform various actions. Depending on the components, large bases and armies can come with a pretty hefty upkeep value that means you need to pay particular attention to your resources and make sure that you don't overcommit. The most obvious examples of these are seen in the per shot energy costs of many energy and high powered plasma shells. Sharpshooters require 500 energy per shot with a 10-second cooldown, so 10 of them will use up half of the output of a fusion reactor whenever they are in a lengthy fight. This doesn't include their cloaking ability, so if you want to do a bit of moving and shooting, you'll need to dedicate a whole fusion reactor to keeping that squad in fighting form. It's a similar story with starlights. Cortex don't have quite the same sort of requirements, but get enough mammoths and sumos blasting away and you can easily leave you wondering where all of your energy went. It's a similar story for a lot of defensive structures. Not just the heavies like pulsars and bulwarks that use a big chunk of energy to fire, but pretty much anything that looks like a beam all the way down to the humble light laser tower. It might only be a small amount, but at the start of the game when you're probably relying on a small number of wind turbines, it can really make a difference. The bigger boys also require metal. Pretty much anything that stockpiles some sort of missile uses both energy and metal to manufacture them. It costs around 200 metal for every shot from a Juno, or from an anti-nuke too, while catalysts and paralyzers are some 550 a punt, and the nuclear missile launcher weighs in at something like 1,000 metal per mushroom cloud. Just having a Juno, an EMP and an anti-nuke on the field is going to cost you something like 12 metal and almost 500 energy per second to upkeep. Are they worth it? Very much so, but you do have to consider their costs when managing your economy. So this is a sort of situation I find myself in quite often. I'll be holding my lane, everything's going okay. My tech player has traded me a construction bot, I'm using that to upgrade my metal extractors. And I've recently won a fight on the front line, reclaimed lots of metal and afforded my Tech 2 lab. Now I want to produce some units, because my opponent's going to have Tech 2 about the same time, and I don't want to be crushed at long range by all his horrible artillery, so I'm going to decide to produce some snipers. The wind's good, I've got plenty of energy coming in, I'm producing lots of windmills, and I've got a geothermal plant up too. Although I'm using a bit more than I'm making, I'm able to complete a sniper without a problem. However, now I'm going to run into some issues. The wind is starting to drop, that's dramatically reducing the amount of energy I can produce. Now I'm trying to produce a second sniper, that's going to slow right down because I'm out of energy. I'm also trying to upgrade my metal extractors because I need to do this sooner rather than later, and that's going to use up another big chunk of energy. This means that when I get into some sort of fight, my snipers aren't going to be able to actually shoot anything. He requires 500 energy for every single shot, which means he's not going to be able to fire until I've got that 500 energy. He'll just sit there doing nothing. My second sniper is going to have even a bigger problem. In fact, all the time that I'm actually producing sharpshooters, I'm hardly going to be able to use them and they're really not going to save me. So what I'd need to do instead is think about my economy. Even though the wind's picking up, I can't really afford to produce these units. Now what I'd love to do is get a fusion reactor out so I can, but my opponent's going to be attacking me and I won't have that luxury. So instead, I need to pick some units to help me that aren't going to have that sort of massive energy output. I do have lots of metal, so I'm going to go for some fat boys. You'll notice that with many units, the amount of energy and metal they use is very different, and it doesn't have a regular correlation either. Fat boys are very metal heavy, but pretty energy light for that metal usage. Also, fat boys don't require any energy to fire. This means that I'll be able to actually support this economy. You see, even with a wind speed of 9.8, I've probably got enough to actually use my sharpshooters to shoot, while continually producing fat boys, and my fat boys will be able to do their damage too. So you have to pay attention to your economy. You can't just build whatever unit you like because that unit's your favourite, or maybe that unit is the best unit for the job. You have to look at what you can actually support, because if you can't properly support those units and continue to build the other things you need, then they're going to be really ineffective and you're just going to get overwhelmed. A good way to visualise this is look at the energy and metal cost of some of the more basic T2 ARM units. You see the Hound here needs 285 metal and 6,300 energy, so that needs 20 times as much energy as it does metal. The Recluse, however, needs 400 metal but only 4,500 energy, so it just needs about 10 times the amount of energy per metal to create it. You'll see that if we try to produce Hounds, our advanced bot lab and our construction turrets are going to use a total of 50 metal and 1,112 energy a second to make that output work. However, if we switch to Recluse, we can look at that number changes hugely. It's still 50 metal a second, exactly the same as Hounds, but it's only actually got half of the energy requirements. This means that if we're really struggling on energy but we've got plenty of metal, then Recluse might be a far better option than producing Hounds. It's a similar story with the fat boys and snipers we looked at earlier. If we produce sharpshooters with these construction turrets in our lab, we see that we need 39 metal and 1,158 energy a second to upkeep this amount of production. That's pretty heavy on the energy, especially on this kind of early economy. However, if we've got lots of metal and not a lot of energy and we switch to fat boys, it's going to cost us 73 metal a second but only 576 energy. That means, like the Recluse, if you've got lots of metal and not a lot of energy, the fat boy and the Recluse are definitely a good thing to go for. Whereas, if you've got lots of energy and not quite as much metal, then the sharpshooters and the Hounds are definitely a lot more affordable. So let's talk about build power and build cost. Everything in Beyond All Reason has a build cost. The higher the build cost, the more build power you need to assign to it to produce it in the same time. There is a rough correlation between the amount of resources something costs and its build cost, although it doesn't always line up exactly. As an example, the hovercraft rocket launcher here requires 200 metal and 3,300 energy, whereas the construction hovercraft requires 1,900 metal and 3,000 energy. So you would think these things have got an almost identical build time. We know that the hovercraft platform provides us with 150 build power, you can see there in the bottom left. If we start the hovercraft rocket launcher, we'll see that it takes... Oh, no, let's move them away because they're assisting. We'll see that it takes about 23 seconds to build, just under. Now if we try the construction hovercraft, we can see that takes 30 seconds to build. So although this is slightly cheaper, it does take longer to build because its build cost is higher. Now I'm not quite sure if the build costs are actually shown in game. I think you might have to go and check them out on a website or use a spreadsheet or something like that. But for a quick guesstimate, just go for the resources. If it costs a lot of resources, it requires a lot of build power. Now there's plenty of ways to get build power. The first way is your commander. Everyone has a commander at the start. Your commander always provides 300 build power. This is very good, and I think 300 is probably the single highest units amount of build power you can get. This is great because it allows you to get things like a light laser tower up very quickly, just 7 or 8 seconds and one's online. As well as the commander, you've also got your construction units. Now these all provide build power, although not the same amount. Aircraft produce the least build power, whereas hovercraft produce the most build power. You can see that this construction aircraft gives you 65, whereas the construction hovercraft gives you 115. It goes up in this order, So aircraft have the least build power, then it's bots, then it's amphibious vehicles, then it's vehicles, and then it's hovercraft. For some reason I'm not quite sure, arm units have a little bit less than core units. So you'll see here that the build power on a construction aircraft is 60, whereas on a core one that's 65, and that's pretty much universal. So you've got 80 on a bot, 85 here, 80, 85, 90, 95, etc, etc. As well as the bots, we have construction turrets. Now, construction turrets can't start any buildings themselves, but they can assist anything in their rather large range. These have the most build power for the cost. So you get 200 build power on a construction turret. That's about the same as 2 vehicles. So essentially, by using construction turrets rather than lots of vehicles, you save a bit of metal and energy. Also, construction turrets are very good at switching between lots of different factories and other buildings because they don't need to move. This is the main reason why people use them. They've also got a very small footprint, which generally means you can pack lots into a small area. There's no advanced construction turret, but there are advanced construction vehicles. So just like before, the aircraft has slightly less build power than the advanced bot or the advanced vehicle, and also the core ones have got a little bit more than the arm ones. Finally, you've got some support units. These have also got build power. So the decoy commander actually has the same build power as a commander. Very powerful. Then you've got the consul, which is a Tech 2 arm vehicle. This has got 150 build power and can build an interesting variety of things. You've got the butler. These have got 140 build power. They're cheaper than the consuls, and they're very fast. These are very good for supporting your other builders. On the core side, you've got the combat engineers. These have got less build power than the others, but they are quite fast at moving around. And then finally, you've got the commando. These are the stealth paratrooper bots. They're a bit of a niche case, so we won't talk about them too much, but they do have a couple of hundred build power, so pretty good on the build power side. But you wouldn't build them just for that because they're very expensive, just like the decoy commander. Something that's very important during a game of Beyond All Reason is to have the right amount of build power for your economy. You don't want to produce too much build power, because not only is that a waste of your resources, it's also a waste of your existing build power. These things are not cheap, and if you think about the early game, spending 210 on a construction turret is the same as spending, well, it's the same as almost having 2 rocketeers or a rocketeer and a couple of pawns. So essentially, if you spend too much money on these things, then you won't have enough units. Also, you require build power to build more build power. So if your construction bot or one of your construction vehicles is busy building more build power, he's not assisting your units. So not only are you wasting resources on build power you don't need, but your unit production will be a lot slower. I think this is a good example because this is the kind of thing you'll see at the start of the game. We've got 6 metal extractors and we've also got a commander. That gives us an income of about 13 metal a second. A common thing will be queue up some wind turbines with our construction bot, which we'll do here. And then we'll queue up some maces as well because we'll need them to fight the front line. If we look at our income, we're actually spending quite a lot more than we're earning. Now you'll see it's going between -7 and then up to 23. That's because there's a small amount of lead time as one unit leaves the factory and the turret switches over to help and then goes back. But instead of looking at these numbers on the left here, let's just look at our total metal. We can definitely see that it's going downward. This means that one construction turret and one construction bot is more build power than we're going to need at the start of the game. As we capture more metal nodes, we can improve this slightly. So let's grab a couple more. So now we've got 8 metal extractors and a commander, we're earning 17 metal a second. If we watch the construction turret build the maces and then flick over to help the bot build the turbines, you'll see that our metal is staying around the 50 mark. It does go up and down a little bit because there's a bit of lead time of course as things switch over, but essentially this small amount of build power, which is 200 plus 80, so this 280 build power is all we need to use all the resources we've got coming in at the moment. This means that if our commander wants to build like laser turrets or other things on the front line, we're not actually going to have much spare. So we don't really need any more build power than this at the start of the game. This here shows that you don't want to commit too hard in build power too early because you don't have the metal to support it. This setup here will only actually produce exactly the same as we were doing down here. The difference is we've spent a lot more money on build power, but because we continually run out of metal, things won't actually happen any faster. Now there is some benefit here, because if we start reclaiming metal from the front line, or we do capture more metal extractors, we'll immediately be able to use that extra metal. But the problem is this all required a lot of investment. We had to build a turret, and we had to build 2 extra construction bots. That's some 400 metal we didn't have on the front line. 10 minutes into the game, that 400 metal is not going to make a lot of difference. But in the first 5 minutes of the game, it really could. It's the difference between having an extra 3 or 4 combat units, and that can really make the difference on the front line. There's another thing to consider, is it actually takes build power to create all of this build power. So let's look at the difference between a construction turret and construction bots. So on this side we're going to start building maces, and on this side we're immediately going to build 2 more construction bots and assist. And over here instead we're going to build a construction turret. The beauty of this method over here is we're using the build power of our bot lab to get our constructors out a lot quicker. This means that our second constructor is already online and boosting the bot lab, while these construction turrets take quite some time to create. Now our third bot's online, we can go and start building our wind turbines. I've got an extra one there, we don't need that. Let's cancel that. Wasted a bit of time, but I don't think it matters. Now remember, this is slightly more build power than this is over here. This means that it's going to require probably 6, well maybe 7 or 8 metal extractors to support this, whereas this works pretty well with 6. But our units are coming out at about the same speed. The real benefit here is we've actually got a bit of mobility. So if we want to go and build something somewhere else, for instance we want to go and get an extra metal extractor down here, with this kind of setup we've got to use our construction bot to stop building windmills and put all our turret into the units. Whereas on this setup over here we can just take one of our bots off, go and build the metal extractor and then tell him to go back to the factory. This will slow our unit production up a little bit, but means we can keep our windmills on the go. Whereas if you've only got the one bot, you don't quite have that option. But as you can see, we're producing units at a similar sort of speed. Okay, so now I think you should have a slightly better understanding of the nuts and bolts of your economy. If you've got a question, leave it in the comment below and I'll do my best to answer it, or pop onto the Discord and I'll chat to you there. If you enjoyed this video, then click the like button, and if you want more of this sort of thing, then subscribe to my channel, and I hope to see you back for the next one.